This is a Hot Pie Media original.
Dallas, I think now when you hear this second case, the Dallas-Fort Worth area is now going to be home to two of the most bizarre murder cases of, I don't know, the last 15, 20 years and beyond. Of course, the most bizarre is the lunatic cop, off-duty cop, who says she went into the wrong apartment and then shoots the poor guy sitting in his apartment, and he's eating ice cream and watching Monday Night Football or whatever. That one's up there. Then there's this. It's awful. It's awful on every level. No one is dismissing the tragedy, but the defense itself, well, here we go. CBSDFW.com reports a 17-year-old who is accused of stabbing his twin sister to death claims that he was sleeping as he stabbed his sister. He's 17 years old. He is charged with murder after he was found by deputies in a bedroom in their home, and he was performing CPR on his sister. Can sleepwalking ever be a defense for killing someone? There we go. Stephen Toland is with me now. He's an attorney. Are you in Dallas or are you here in Austin?
Hey, good morning, Jeff. I'm in Austin. I'm Austin. We have offices in Houston and San Antonio, but none in Dallas.
Well, counselor,
way to start me off with a softball.
Yeah, sleepwalking murder. I mean, I don't know. You may have to turn around and go to the bookshelf and find out if there's any examples of this. But, I mean, look, I read this full story. Once you get over the tragedy of this, killed his twin sister, you start to think, well, he was performing CPR, they say, when they found him. Is it possible?
Is it possible to raise that defense, or is that defense likely to win?
Both.
Right?
Both.
Yeah. Sure, it's possible to raise that defense. I'm not sure that defense is going to get you to where you're still not going to have to plead out to murder, or at least be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter or something like that. I think that's a misconception, right? Is that we sometimes think, well, hold on, you're making this defense, therefore you're getting off scot-free. Well, no, you're still likely going to have to accept the fact that you involuntarily killed somebody. The question goes down to an intentional act. And so murder is varying degrees, right? And so it is possible to say, usually we'll see them with Ambien. Usually you see them with adults who take sleeping pills. They've got a diagnosis for a sleeping disorder. Everyone knows Ambien can make you do some crazy things, not remember things. Sleepwalking in and of itself, highly unlikely to work unless it's been documented before. At some point, it's just going to be hard to show that you didn't wake up at some point. Some furtive gesture, man, you're moving, you're going crazy there. Not being flippant about what happened, I realize it's a tragedy. I just mean at some point you would think your furtive movements would wake you up. And so
yeah, I'm trying to think in terms, if you're defending him, so you've got to go, if you're trying to defend him, and I assume I don't know, it's tragic for the family on every level, but so you have to find a medical professional that would say, that would give you an exam, right? It would go through all this and say, I know the prosecution is saying, surely you would wake up if you're stabbing someone. You're going to have to find a medical professional that would say, they would argue, no, you would not wake up, right? That's pretty much what this would be based on?
Well, first, I guess if I were defending this person, I'd first want to try and keep it as a juvenile case, right? So I assume this person is going to be certified as an adult because they're 17. So that's a whole sort of procedure there that could likely move quickly. I've represented juvenile murder cases before. In fact, just finished one up here in Central Texas. So that's the first thing. Assuming it becomes an adult case and certified as an adult, then yeah, what you'd argue is that it's not a voluntary act. It's an involuntary act. And then you start talking about manslaughter and things like that. Involuntary manslaughter is what you'd probably be looking at. But you've got to be able to document that. You can't just say that. So I guess you would do some neurological studies and try and show some way that could actually be pliable or plausible. I don't know the answer to that.
Has historically, I mean, at a certain level, has the Ambien argument worked?
Well, sure, it can work, but for manslaughter, it's a little trickier because there's usually a backstory, right? So kind of depends on what weapon was used, where the weapon was found, how much circumstantially, what other elements are there, right? Like I went to a drawer and the drawer's locked, and then I unlocked the drawer and I pulled out a weapon and I loaded it. Well, the more preceding steps in line, the less likely the ambient argument's going to be to work. But if you get in your car and you plow into somebody and you're on ambient, that's totally different. Or I'm just trying to think of examples. I guess if you push someone down the stairs in the middle of the night, like you'll see some Netflix shows on that. Somebody's murdered by falling down the stairs and they're saying they were intentionally pushed. I think it just kind of depends on the weapon and the circumstances surrounding it, but it can work. But it's very difficult.
To your point, I mean, to your point, we can assume that this 17-year-old doesn't go to bed at night with a knife in his bed, so he's got to go somewhere and get it.
Right. That's
walk
a problem.
around and get it. Open the drawer. Nowhere. Yeah. Oh boy.
No, it's a tragedy. No question about it. And what's relationship context evidence is always a huge critical element in any murder case. So they're not strangers, right? Obviously. And so that inures to the benefit of both sides, because you would argue, look, nothing more tragic than losing your twin. In fact, people talk about, and you could probably introduce some scientific evidence about this, like when one twin has surgery, the other twin sometimes can feel it and things like that. I mean, you hear studies about that, how close twins are. But that can also work to the other side, too. They're so close, there's got to be a lot of history there. Eesh. What's that history? If I'm a prosecutor, I'm digging into that history. I want to know what's the backstory here. There's got to be a backstory, and maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just the sleepwalking deal. I don't know. But I would imagine there's a lot of backstory, and it can inure to the benefit of either side. You just got to dig into it.
Is his best chance, I mean, obviously a lower charge, is his best chance that mom and dad come to his defense? I mean, if you're defending him, and you've said you've done a juvenile murder case, the best thing for you, are you saying mom and dad, you can make a big difference here? You got to talk about what a good kid he is and how well they got along.
Sure. I would say, Jeff, you got to do that. And you got to essentially, who's going to know that kid best? I'm assuming you want to obviously not have the child testify. Juvenile proceedings are a little different. So if it becomes an adult proceeding, it's certified as an adult and you're in adult court, you're going to maintain your right to silence there. And so who better to explain the context of any issues of sleepwalking? Yeah, at 5, they really harmed themselves. They fell down the stairs. At 10, this happened. We went to see this pediatrician about it. We had history of bedwetting. I mean, I don't know. You got to be creative. You got to figure it out,
Wow,
that's a tough one.
That is so mess. It's
tragic.
I didn't think. Hey, look, you're in the business, but I didn't think I would hear of another case as bizarre and messed up as that cop that said she went to the wrong house. Or no, I'm sorry, she thought she was at her apartment and shot that guy. I thought that was about as extreme and bizarre as anything I could think of until this.
Well, that one is really hard to believe because I don't care how tired you are. I get it. I mean, sometimes we've all done that where you leave and we're like, holy cow, I thought I grabbed my sunglasses and I left the house and didn't, or I thought I grabbed this or that, but that's a little different.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Since we have a lawyer sitting here, what we now have sort of clarified vaccine mandates being legal, right? We've now arrived at a sort of a pretty clear conclusion. Employers, Southwest Airlines being the latest example, that no longer an issue, correct? Or is it?
Define issue, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I guess if you're talking
by the letter of the law, is it pretty well decided?
I think so. I think if I'm an employer, I mean, if I'm advising and I'm worried about employer liability, and someone's calling me and saying, "Hey, I've got my business and I'm worried about it. Am I liable? Am I on the hook? What should I do here?" I feel like that is somewhat well settled now.
So you can say to any size business, hey, whether it's a good idea, whether you think it's going to help employee morale, legally you would tell somebody, yep, you can tell them you got until X day to get vaccinated or walk.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is an at-will state when it comes to an employer-employee liability. So that's one issue that would certainly, support what you're saying, Jeff. And then also, I think you can come up with new ways to work from home. I mean, now we're in a place, obviously. I mean, you and I are communicating. We're not in the same studio, right? Yeah. It'd be fun to be hanging out, be in the same place. We're not, obviously. That I'm not taking that personal, by the way. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it's probably you can look around the studio here if you want. I mean, we got a strobe light here. We got farm animals that wander around. I mean, really, this is a place you really want to be. Trust me. Yeah. So what other?
You could come up with ways to solve that. You could say you can work from home. You can now. That doesn't mean you have to. You could say, look, our business is predicated upon the need to be here and interact in a certain way, or we need you here because things happen in real time. And so we've just come up with a system where you got to be here in the same building. And so therefore we need you to be vaccinated. You could do that. And I don't think you're subjecting yourself to any liability.
Well, what legally has happened? Is it because the feds have stepped in, for instance, and you'll know this, the restaurant, or this is sort of a few months ago, the restaurant in East Austin says, we're going to have a vax mandate. Greg Abbott, no way, not on my watch. You'll lose your liquor license. The next day, the owner of the restaurant says, okay, sorry, we're backing off. What has happened since then that would enable a restaurant owner now to say, is it just that Abbott has backed away from this position, or is there something legally that has happened that protects him that it didn't protect him 2 months ago?
Well, that's a different story. I think sometimes those are almost comparing, apples to washing machines when it comes to state certifications and licensure issues, because I would counsel a restaurant owner maybe something different. I might say, put a sign up that says you would prefer people wear masks, or you would ask people to wear masks. The restaurant owner's in a really tough spot, right? Because last thing you want to do is upset your customer base. I mean, profit margins razor thin in the food and beverage industry anyway. And if you lose your liquor license, you're in deep trouble. So I think those are issues that are being litigated in real time. School districts are a good analogy of that. So I think if you're a restaurant, the state maybe could come back and say, well, look, if you're going to do that, then we're not going to certify your TABC license. I'm not sure that's directly legal, but I would not want to risk that if I were a restaurant owner. I'd tell you that.
Okay, you would say, hey, it's a pretty good idea. Don't be that. Don't make it that black and white.
It's sad that we're at that place. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't interject my own personal thoughts on that, but because I feel like if you own your business, you ought to be able to do that if you feel like you want to. And you talk to any business owner, and I'm myself included, it is really hard to hire staff right now. I mean, that's all anyone talks about. Now, what's the cause of that? I don't know. Is it because of PPP loans and benefits and things like that? I don't know if that's truly the answer or not. Who cares? Point is, it's a really tough time to hire people. So if I'm a restaurant owner and I've got my staff telling me, hey, I'm not coming unless everyone's vaccinated.
Right.
I'm going to be pretty upset if I can't institute that policy as my own business and then worry about the collateral consequences of the government coming down and saying, hey, man, we're going to take away your TABC license. I mean, that's just unfortunate, but I'd be worried about that. It can happen. It's a pretty contentious issue, and it seems like it's a political issue, to be frank, right? I mean, I think you're seeing one ideological party using that as a platform, and so it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I would say, I would say idiotic. I mean, I think businesses are proving. I mean, I think businesses are proving that it's a selling proposition. I mean, you're going to want to go and then go to a bar or restaurant. You're going to want to work at a place where they're vaccinated, where this is not an issue.
Right. And you deserve the right as a business owner to create your own culture. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, have been my whole life. That's, if you talk to any restaurateur, man, they're an entrepreneur at spirit and heart. And, they want their team to all be rowing in the same direction. And it's if your team all agrees, man, we all want to be vaccinated except for, one person or whatever, it's difficult.
So can you foresee COVID-related issues legal issues down the road? What would they be? I mean, I know we've had, this vax thing is kicked around. It's political football. It's a legal issue. We all know that. Are there other vax COVID-related issues down the road that you think are going to be litigated?
Gosh, it's hard to say, because a lot of these, to me, I tend to look at whether it's criminal or civil liability. I always kind of look at remedies, and I look at harm. Those are kind of two things I focus on. So, and causation, I guess, is another one. So some of the things I could see is if you represented that your restaurant or something was safe and everyone had a certain, we all are vaccinated, and then someone got deathly ill or died because of COVID, I guess you could see some type of liability there if you represented your restaurant as a certain level of safety or something like that. That's It's hard to imagine though, because how do you prove it, right? I mean, causation becomes an issue. So these issues about school and stuff, I think at some point I would imagine I don't know who has standing to keep litigating these issues, right? It's like the school board versus the government. But, I don't know personally, like business owner wise, personal liability wise, I don't know.
But the legal argument,
sue a business for not letting you in there because you're not wearing a mask. I just don't know. I don't know what your harm is. I don't know how you show harm.
I've been wondering about, and you would think it would have happened, right? And that is, I went to Steve's bar to have a glass of wine. Next thing you know, I have COVID and I live with my dad, and my dad's 85 and dad's on a ventilator. Where you go and people start arguing, I got COVID. I didn't think I would get COVID at your place. It's sort of like slip and fall of COVID almost, right? Would those things, that's maybe a terrible example, but would those things have already been cycled through legally?
No. In fact, I've got my business cards made up for that exact business.
Nice. Nice. You're going to hang around the bar. Hey, you're coughing. Hey, I'm Steve.
COVID
you're
chaser.
coughing. You're coughing.
COVID chaser,
you're
Jeff.
coughing.
Got me. No, I don't necessarily believe with your premise that they've already been litigated. Things in the law sometimes can move slow. I think the reason is because it's really hard to prove that. And also there's a equitable maxim or doctrine that always kicks in called assumption of the risk. And so, we've shut down the world. You can get groceries at home. You can go drive through and pick up booze and go back to your house. So I think at some point a judge would throw that out and say, man, you kind of assume the risk there, pal. You're the one who went out in public and did that. So
okay.
It's different if you need a necessary service. Like there's one dialysis place in my 100-mile geographic region, and they are not letting, I have to be vaccinated to go get my dialysis. And I guess I could see something like that being potentially an issue. But then you would argue, the counter argument would be, but everyone else is sort of in some critical care or compromised, immunocompromised. So we need you to be vaccinated, and we can do home health. We can bring the dialysis machine to you. So I feel like those are kind of flushed out already. But you never know.
Maybe. So you're telling me your colleagues are not out doing that COVID chasing thing?
We're not the most reputable lot, but I think even we have our standards, Jeff. I think.
Wow. Okay, I'll let you go with that.
You're gonna let me slide.
Yeah, you go right ahead with that. You keep that up. Then I'll dump this one on you instead. Tell me how. Here you go. You go straight into hot water here. We'll use Donald Trump.
Sure.
So there's the political optics, of course. More people seem to be jumping in, but more people seem to be jumping in with the idea that if he's in, I've got to be out. I'm wondering if they know something we don't know, and I'm wondering if that real risk is that he's in real legal risk. Forget the CFO test, whatever tax issues are out there. I'm wondering about this case of meddling in the Georgia election. And then I'm wondering, because it seems to be moving forward, and I think so highly of politicians, they're not climbing to get in if they didn't know he was out. So I'm wondering if there's maybe something bubbling here legally that we just don't realize, and it's not just noise. So I guess what I'm asking, it's slimy at best. He's calling the Secretary of State in Georgia and squeezing him. That's kind of what he was doing. But tell me the case, each side of the legal case, that he's committed an illegal act. Under what situation, me calling you up and saying, hey, Steve, come on, man. Have you counted the votes down there? What's going on with you, you jackass? What's up? Tell me how that's illegal. John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of ATX Hot Sauce, now in all 50 states and several retail outlets as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to let this social media rock star chef walk us through 4 different sauces, and then I'll taste, and we'll tell everyone why they should buy. You can give the science behind these, and then I'll make the simple recommendation. Go to atxhotsauce.com. All right,
I don't think anybody's heard the website.
Yeah, I know.
By you, Jeff,
I've never heard
it is atxhotsauce.com.
I'll say
I got that one right.
45 times, atxhotsauce.com. So let's do it.
I brought 4 flavors here, and we're going to test your palate today. Okay. And I only brought 4 because I didn't think you could handle 5 or 6.
Yes,
probably a smart move. Yeah. And so the first one we're going to try here is called Beet Heat. And just like the name implies, it has beets in it. It's made with red Fresno peppers. Red Fresnos are red peppers that are they're hotter than a jalapeno and a little bit less than a serrano. So not super hot here, just a lot of really good flavor. So we're going to start with this one, and then we're going to move up the chain.
Okay. I've had the Beet Heat, but okay.
Yeah, we're going to try it though.
It goes well with a cab. All right, Jeff's savoring Beet Heat.
I'll even do it with you, so that should be all right. Now remember, it is hot sauce.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's hot sauce. Trust me, man.
Wait, is that one hot to you?
No. A little.
Yeah. The great thing with the fermentation process is you get a bunch of the flavor right up front.
Yeah.
And then the heat comes, but then it dissipates pretty quickly, especially with the red Fresnos. You know, this is not a very spicy one, but it is a very tasty one. Goes on great on sandwiches.
Beet Heat.
Beet Heat. B-E-E-T. Heat.
All right. Go to atxhotsauce.com.
That's right.
Well, that's not illegal because I get called a jackass every day. But I think I think what we have is more than puffery or more than just are you sure you're doing your job right? Are you sure these timelines are valid? Are you sure these votes didn't come in late? What I've seen, it's an hour-long recording with Raffensperger, and it's pretty damning. I would say there's a substantial risk of criminal liability, but I'm always careful with my words here. That doesn't mean it's worth the money or the time to go forth with that. And so that's money that county spends, that district attorney spends. That's political capital and equity that district attorney spends. And so that's the problem. But and then
wait, Steve, separating it out. Yeah. Separate out the political optics, as you said. I mean, it's political suicide for a local prosecutor, probably. But what on that tape would you say would be criminal liability? Like, what could I say or do if I'm the president of the United States and said, come on, man?
Right. Okay. So, it reminds me of those old Budweiser commercials like, dude,
yeah.
Like, come on, man.
Well, that's how Trump talks. I mean, I could see him doing that. A lot more than
come on, man is the problem.
Okay.
So first you look at the context of totality of the circumstances is something you'll hear in criminal defense law all the time. So the totality is he starts off his day by adamantly declaring that he's won Georgia. Everyone knows he needs to win Georgia. He declares he's won Georgia. So he's obviously, that's his intent. He knows he needs to win. So you look at some of his actions at the beginning to frame his intent. And then when he calls, I guess he starts off with some mischaracterizations would be the nicest way to say that. But, hey, I hear 18,000 votes got destroyed. Hey, I hear there's dead legal votes that were counted. Hey, I hear there's 3,000 pounds of votes literally in these bags that, that were destroyed or delivered too late. There was a lot of statements he made at the beginning. And the Washington Post, did an excellent job. I'm not saying they're great or not great. I'm just saying they were the first news source the next day to kind of say they have this recording. So then the Brookings Institute did this whole study after that. So I'm not just sort of pulling this out of thin air off Facebook or something. These are actual, quotes from this recording, Jeff. And so then you have that. And then he says, at some point, go find me 11,780 votes that could be deemed fraudulent and toss them out. And so let's take that line by line here. The number of votes is fascinating. So clearly he knows how many votes he needs. And that's if I'm a prosecutor, that's kind of damning to me because that's clearly on its face intentional interference with the performance of election duties. All right. He doesn't have standing. I don't care if he's president or not. No one has standing to then interfere with somebody who's an elected official, took an oath, and has a sworn obligation to do their job. Never mind, they're part of the same freaking political party.
Right, exactly.
In of itself is really damning to me too. If I'm a prosecutor, like if I'm just sort of setting the context for jurors in that community, I'm like, look, if you're all Republicans on my pettit jury pool, I get it, but man, next time it could be the other way around. And nothing's more sacrosanct to a democracy than freaking confidence in our elections.
Right.
And so we can go off on that forever. But anyway, it's the specific number of votes he tells him, and then he orders him. It's an order or an instruction. It's a command. And so the argument isn't he's the president giving a command. It's just he's giving a direct command of what he wants to see happen. So it doesn't matter who he is, but he's telling an elected official to do something that any common sense person, and this person in particular, would know is illegal to do. So he's instructing them to go do an illegal act in a specific way, with a specific result. So this crime is not a results-oriented crime. Some crimes are results-oriented, like murder, the result, right? So you could have attempted murder, you could have conspiracy, solicitation. Murder itself, if you charge that, it's a results-oriented crime. Somebody has been murdered. This is a conduct-oriented crime. So we don't care about the results of what he did or didn't do after, he being Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. We're not Secretary of State, whatever you call his official title in Georgia, but you're looking instead at the conduct of what he told him to do. That's it, not the result. And so I would say there's criminal conspiracy to commit election fraud. There's intentional interference with performance of election duties. That's the base minimum.
Yeah. Okay. So there is. I've thought about. Yeah. I mean, so the defense is. Trump's defense is, or his lawyer's defense of him is, oh, come on, he says stuff all the time. You know, that's just the way he operates. I mean, I've always thought this was the best defense of Trump at every level, that this guy's just kind of an incompetent buffoon. He's not going to really come up. But your argument is, if you're defending him, what ruins your defense is, hey, what do you mean he's a competent buffoon? He knew exactly how many votes he was arguing about, right?
Well, he said a couple other things in there too. So I would say that the beginning of the conversation is setting the table to see whether he's going to play along with him, so he doesn't have to go to that ultimate next step of giving an order and telling him what he wants to have him do. So he plays along. He throws out these, I would say he's fishing. You know, if I'm a prosecutor, I'd say he's laying the bait or throwing out the lures and saying, hey, what do you think about these dead people voting? What do you think about these these votes coming in late because of COVID? They allowed people to vote by mail, and that came in late. What do you think about this or that? And when Raffensperger doesn't bite on any of that, he gets more direct and more specific. So I'd look at the context or arc of that whole conversation. And then I would look at the specific number of votes he orders him to go find and toss out. And then I would look at, I'd probably look at those two things. I mean, yeah. I think then he said, I know what it was. I was going to remember, Jeff, is he says something about, well, you can't believe, Raffensperger says, well, you can't believe some of those things you hear, Mr. President. That's the media. And he goes, well, you're going to have to answer to the Trump media. So there's something else about the power of sort of like, not only the presidential power, it's just, again, it doesn't have to be the president. It doesn't have to be somebody above you ordering somebody else to do something for this crime to be committed. It's just anybody knowingly and intentionally interfering with your sworn election.
Is that the technical crime, the name of the potential crime here? It's not abuse. You know, we hear all the time abuse of power. It's almost most of us don't even know if that's a throwaway term. Right. Okay, that's a separate crime. What's the technically what is
crime doesn't exist in Texas. I mean, apparently there's no such thing as an elected official abusing their power in Texas. But apparently in other states they're still interested.
So what is technically the crime that can stick?
Well, again, I think the ones I have researched or seen, is criminal conspiracy. You could do that at federal level or state level. So criminal conspiracy to commit election fraud, that one is broader in scope. And so, if I'm a prosecutor, I'm looking at that and thinking there's a lot of ways I could charge that. And then because you could come into other states, you could talk about, hiring some really savvy, street smart young guns like Rudy Giuliani. I'm kidding. Or, you could talk about all kinds of behavior. But the one that seems like the easiest is the intentional interference with performance of election duties just based on that phone call, just based on the actions of January, of his actions that day, like what he did that day and how he did it. I think is pretty easy,
So you're saying it's not an issue of whether or not this is most likely criminal. The issue is whether or not there's enough of a mafia to scare the prosecutor away from a political mafia to scare the prosecutor away from pursuing this. Is that it? Is that really what it's going to boil down to? Is whether or not that prosecutor I think Trump probably lost. Well, I don't know. Who would be prosecuting this case?
Well, you're talking about the DA?
Yeah.
Willis, I think is their name.
Would that be most? Is this this is an area Trump lost, I'm assuming.
Right. So you could, I mean, he's the one who made the phone call. So it's his intentional interference that you would argue. And then there's all kinds of phone calls after that. But I think if I'm the DA too, I'm not only looking at the optics of it politically and all those things. I mean, that's just a reality of it. That's sad but true. That's in every community. We can't be that naive to not know that exists everywhere. But it's also the issue of the cost of that. You know, the cost of like having somebody with Secret Service agents come to court and, you know, how much, I don't know, what are you asking local judges, your deputies, your sheriffs, your marshals, your Secret Service, your community? So I think that's a factor that goes into these charging decisions. It's the same with a murder case, whether you choose to go after somebody for capital murder or whether you're going to take a plea for 40 years for murder. It's a cost issue. It's just reality. So, how much time are you going to use for your investigators? Who is paying for that? What's the allocation of resources?
Yeah, assuming the charges are brought, and assuming, I know this is a stretch, that Rudy is not representing him in this case.
If Rudy still has a law license anywhere in the United States, at that point,
if he's not in a rocking chair drooling on himself, let's assume that because this, I've got to assume a prosecutor's thinking, okay, I talked to Steve in Austin, and I've got a legitimate case here, but Trump and his goons are going to go raise $50 million, $100 million, and they'll muck this case up forever. Correct?
Yes. Well, let's talk about what mucking something up forever is in criminal procedure. There aren't the same level of delay. What do they call it? Sort of delay tactics is probably the nicest way to say it. There are a lot of civil motions you can file in discovery, interrogatories, requests for production. You can sort of delay things and slow things down. You can ask to take depositions ad nauseum. You can file motions to quash all these motions that people file and motions to have someone's deposition taken. In civil and criminal, you're not allowed to take depositions unless you show a substantial need because someone like lives on the other side of the world or is about to die of a terminal illness, and you want to lock down their testimony before they die because you're thinking they're not going to be available at the time of trial. So you can't really send out civil discovery like that. You can just get a copy of what the state's investigators have uncovered, and you have reciprocal obligations. It's kind of like our Michael Morton Act here in Texas, where we've got to turn stuff over too. But that's it. So you could spend a whole ton of money and have 3 or 4 of the best lawyers in the world, and I'm sure he would. I would too. But I'm not sure how much delay that would be. Okay. I don't know how much you could delay all that. So delay is not really the issue necessarily for me on that one.
Okay. I mean, I bring all this up not because it's just, it's another Trump subject. It's that, you have Nikki Haley, you have Mike Pence, you have seemingly Greg Abbott, you have Ron DeSantis. I mean, they're all kind of hanging around this race, and I've got to believe if the signal was sent that Trump, 1, is going to run, and 2, going to be legally able to run, they would have bailed and said, we worship the dear leader kind of stuff. Something's up. And I'm wondering what's up. Yeah. They don't trust Trump. He's going to take the money and run, or they're wondering if, legally the dude's in real trouble.
There's so many theories about it. I mean, other theories you hear about, and it's funny he referenced that comment to Raffensperger, he being Trump, when he talks about Trump media in general. I mean, a lot of people have always speculated that this has always been a way to maximize the value of what he will launch as this giant media conglomerate, something like that. And so the longer he stays in the fray and stays relevant, I don't know. But then you see the incredible ego that goes into this, and you think, no, he really wants to run again. And so I don't know how long people circle around the mud pit without getting muddy. I'm amazed. No one slipped and fallen and gotten muddy. I mean, that old saying, we say in Texas, like you wrestle with a pig, you both get muddy. And
right.
I don't know. I don't know how they keep doing it and avoiding that, but somehow they do. It's amazing.
Yeah. You have a picture of Rudy in your office? Is this sad for lawyers to watch Rudy just crater?
I'm kind of torn between Ted Lasso or Rudy for Halloween. I just can't really. It's a close call for me.
I don't know how many times in the last year I've said, poor Rudy. I find myself thinking, why didn't they just take him out to have some soup and just not let this happen to him? Look at him now.
I know. I might head over to Cherry Hill or Philadelphia.
Yeah, he was once kind of cool. I mean, he was a famous lawyer, then a cool mayor, and kind of interesting dude, and now look at him. Look what happens. Mm-hmm. See, lesson learned, counselor, never, ever represent a politician.
I don't know if that's the lesson, Jeff, because I'd already be in trouble. But I will say that certainly ego can get you in trouble, man.
All right, Steve, thanks for doing this. You're not careful, you'll be the unofficial legal analyst for this show, which is trouble.
That's trouble for both of us, but I would love the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Have a good day.
From the Hot Pie Media Studios in Austin, Texas, it's the Jeff Ward Show. Listen at jeffwardshow.com.